On this episode of Arts Weekly, I'm speaking with Tom Rush and Country Joe McDonald.
The more specific a song is about whatever topic, the more powerful it is.
This is Arts Weekly.
Arts Weekly is a production of the College of Visual and Performing Arts at IPFW, offering degrees in fine arts, music, theater, and visual communication and design. IPFW, the energy of arts.
Hello, I'm Chuck O'Connor, and this is Arts Weekly. Joining me are recording artists Tom Rush and Country Joe McDonald. They are here to discuss their extensive careers in music and their appearance at IPFW as part of the Omnibus Lecture Series. Welcome to Fort Wayne to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And it's an honor to have you on our show.
It's an honor to be here.
I appreciate it. I really enjoy your music. What brings you both to Fort Wayne? How long have you known each other, I guess, and what brings you here to Fort Wayne today?
We've known each other about 12 hours now.
I think
perhaps.
it's about 12 hours.
Pretty established friendship then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We bonded right away.
No, we never met before we got off our respective airplanes last night, and
Yeah.
we met at the airport.
And you're here to perform and talk, and the topic is activism now and then, correct?
Musical activism.
Musical
yes.
activism now and then. Do you consider yourselves, I guess, and this might be a question for each of you separately, I guess, activists in one sense and musicians in another? Do the two join together, or are they really two separate things for you? You go off and do your activist activities separately, and then your music is really about something else. Now, I would imagine each one of you would answer that question a little differently, but we'll start with you, Tom.
You know, I've never done many what you would call protest songs in my shows. I've always regarded myself really as an entertainer that uses music as a medium, and I try to, give people a little bit of a holiday from everything that's wrong with the world. I do actually nowadays do probably more topical songs than I've ever done in the past. But I've been involved in protest movements in the '60s and some activism in between then and now. But it's never really made it onto the stage or into my songs.
Okay. And Joe, obviously, you're very famous for a particular song, which we're going to talk about in this show. But do you consider yourself an activist through your music?
Well, I do quite a lot of different kinds of music, and I grew up with a pretty eclectic mix of music in Southern California. And part of that mix was political songs from Woody Guthrie, from Pete Seeger, and union songs that my parents listened to. So that was part of on my plate of the different kinds of music that I performed. Love songs and blues and folk and jazz. A certain percentage of it was always that kind of a song. Topical songs, you would call them. Songs of social subjects. So I just included, I became very famous for doing one song like that, but those kind of songs represent about 20% of my repertoire, I would say. Okay,
well, clearly the Vietnam War ended and the civil rights movement gained traction for many, many reasons. And music, obviously, in the 60s had a strong part of that. Do you have a sense that music still has that kind of power for social change now, or more than now?
I don't think that music causes social change, but music can validate how you feel. If you're feeling a certain thing, like for instance, if you're feeling, well, my heart is broken, and then the singer sings a song about their heart being broken, you go, oh, I'm having a common feeling and a common experience. Mm-hmm. And that can happen with any experience, and it happens with social issues too. So you can talk about in music certain subjects that you don't hear talked about in private, but you can be feeling them. Let's say homosexuality, for instance, and you hear a song about homosexuality, you can think, okay, so it gives a certain power and empowers the listener. It empowers the listener. I don't think that it causes change, but that empowerment can cause people to do things that they normally wouldn't do.
Yeah, I like what you said. It sort of validates the feelings that they might have already had and empowers them to do something about it, correct?
And it can solidify a movement. You know, I think in the civil rights movement in particular, there were many songs that were very central to that movement. These were people that all pretty much agreed with what the songs said, but it, as Joe says, validated their feelings and gave the movement a cohesive nature.
Yeah, and I think, we like to think of songs that somehow or another the Vietnam War ended with Bob Dylan singing Blowing in the Wind, but really, in a sense, he's saying something that we were ready to hear at that time.
Yeah.
Tom, do you think that songs, as a songwriter, so speaking about the craft of songwriting, that the most successful songs, even the ones with big messages, for instance, are most effective because they tell stories about people and they bring it down to a personal level? I think of Springsteen, for instance, and how the characters in his songs are really, even though they're just songs and stories, they're caught up in this giant current of what's going on right now. And I hear the same thing in actually both of your songs. But what's the power of just plain old storytelling to get a message across, is my question.
Well, I do think that the more specific a song is about whatever topic, the more powerful it is. And it's very difficult to write a compelling song about the tax code. But you can
tax code.
Yeah, but you can revise the tax code is not going to sell a lot of copies. But if you can write a song about somebody that's affected by the tax code or whatever issue it is. The clearest example I can think of is Woody Guthrie's Deportees. A plane crashed carrying a lot of people that were being deported back to Mexico. And the newspaper said the pilot and the co-pilot were killed and the rest were deportees, no names. And Guthrie then gave them names. He said, goodbye to you, Juan, goodbye, Rosalita.
Clearly you both have been influenced by Woody Guthrie.
Oh, yeah.
As has the whole country has. He was obviously saying eloquently about the Depression, but do you think that people were listening to Woody Guthrie at the time that Woody Guthrie was singing, or have we kind of looked back and said, wow, this guy is amazing, the way he articulated what was going on in the country at the time? I know that you grew up listening to a lot of Woody Guthrie albums, Joe.
Well, they weren't albums, they were actually breakable, 78 RPM records. But Woody, a lot of people listened to Woody Guthrie. He went to migrant labor camps and he sang his songs. But those people were not people who were buying records. They were very poor. They didn't have records. It was his wife, really, Marjorie Guthrie, who kept the archives alive and kept working at dispersing his music. Nora Guthrie, his daughter, now continues that. Or otherwise, he might have been forgotten. I'm not sure. His first album release was very popular, but after that, he was kind of a hit and miss career as a commercial musician. But in a non-commercial world, people were listening and paying attention to him. It's the music business and how people stay alive and things is very complicated. He's become both a folk hero now and a commercial entity. And his music is used from everything to advertising Fords, to selling soft drinks, to songs for opening of sports events, to almost a national anthem.
Right.
This Land Is Your Land, I think, is sometimes say unofficial national anthem. Odd for a person who was really antisocial and hated at one time because of him possibly being a member of the Communist Party. But now his hometown honors him with a festival and all that stuff. So, you never know.
Isn't that something, how we co-opt everything? I think about when I travel around the world and see people, tourists, wearing Che Guevara T-shirts, and it just amazes me. What are some of your musical influences? We spoke of Woody Guthrie, but with Tom, for you, who are some of the people that you listen to?
I'm very easily influenced. I'm a bit of a sponge. So I was very much influenced by all the late 50s rock and roll singers, although that's a muted influence in what I do nowadays. Josh White, all the old blues guys, Sleepy John Estes, Booker White, those guys. just about everybody I've listened to, Country Joe McDonald, is an influence.
And you, Joe?
Well, my interests are very eclectic. As a teenager, I didn't speak very well, very poor communication skills, and I always found a comfort in music. And initially, all kinds of music, jazz and Gilbert and Sullivan, and
Wow.
And black blues, and some semi-symphonic music. You know, my audience has a certain taste in what they expect of me. I can't make them like something. From me, they expect a certain thing, and I don't exactly know what that is. But my influences have been great, and music just calms me down. If I don't play music with some regularity, I get kind of irritable and sketchy, and my wife will complain, my family. Yeah, because there's a non-communication thing about music, I think, that it communicates and it has you feel it, but you can't really articulate what it means. It's not literally the words of a song or the music itself.
It works through your heart, in a way.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
You know, the song, I always remember the song Mrs. Robinson by Simon and Garfunkel, and there's that famous line in it, where have you gone, Joe DiMaggio? But for me, you know, the most haunting line comes right after that, where it says, our nation turns its lonely eyes to you. And people forget that one because it comes right after. But, you know, years later, Simon was saying, you know, I really couldn't write Sound of Silence as a person right now. I've moved on as a man. I've moved on as a musician. And in a way, I think we like to fix our heroes, our youth, our music in a place. And I guess my question for you guys is that, you know, in dealing with your fans and their expectations, as you just mentioned, how do you deal with that? How do you sing the same song that you might have written for a girl 40 years ago today? And how have you changed as musicians as a result?
Well, I try to not take myself too seriously. Oftentimes, it's a living. I get paid to do it. I'm very, very lucky. I enjoy doing it, and the audience dictates, you know, what I do. And I'm not going to argue with them. I've tried to convince them that certain songs mean certain things, and they're not convinced, and I just accept it as a gift now. Right. You know. But
they still ask for what they remember you singing years ago.
And some songs I would think, well, they're going to know what I'm talking about. I'd be very self-conscious, but they don't know because they listen. It's all music is subjective. Mm-hmm. The listener identifies with it, like those two lines you were quoting. Mm-hmm. You know, where have you gone, Joe DiMaggio? Our nation turns its lonely eyes to you. It's beautiful, isn't it? Mm-hmm. But what does it mean? Mm-hmm. And why did he write it?
Yeah. Yeah. How did he come up with that?
It's just,
I think it came out of nowhere.
This stuff just pops out of your head, and you put it to a chord, and then...
And let other people make sense of it a little bit.
Sometimes other people go like, oh, I don't like that. Or they go, hey, I like that. And you try to go with the, hey, I like that part.
Yeah. Of course.
Well, we're going to take a break for just a minute. We're talking with Tom Rush and Country Joe McDonald. Arts Weekly will return in a moment. Welcome back to Arts Weekly. We are continuing our discussion with Tom Rush and Country Joe McDonald. I didn't go to Woodstock. Saw the movie, though. Obviously, Country Joe, your song, I Feel Like I'm Fixing to Die Rag, is, you know, one of the most memorable parts of the movie. It's a brilliant sort of sing-along, follow the dots kind of song that I think is brilliant in a sense that it parodies not only the war itself, but I think the inurement that the country was kind of feeling towards it. Did you start off, I guess, to be a protest singer, since that's what you were kind of known for by that song, or did it just happen, or did you do it to get girlfriends, or how did it all happen for you?
No, a certain part of my repertoire was those social political songs, but at that moment, only about 10%. And I just happened to be on stage because the Santana Band didn't have their equipment. They found me a guitar. They told me that I had to do something to keep the audience happy. And nobody paid any attention to me at all until I walked off stage and I asked my associate, should I save the song and the cheer for when the band played or do it now? And he said, nobody's paying any attention to you. What difference does it make what you do? And so that kind of made me bold, and I thought, well, okay, I relaxed, and I went out there, and I yelled, "Give me an F," and pretty much everybody stopped talking and looked at me and yelled F, and the rest of it happened just like that. I didn't know they were filming it.
Oh my God.
It was one of those fortuitous things that changed my life and provided some entertainment, and it was valuable, I suppose.
Yes, it's just amazing to hear 500,000 people shouting back at you.
That's a very empowering moment
Yeah.
to hear half of people yelling that word. Even today, I still do it today, and is it profound or important to say that people love to yell that word?
I don't know, but
collectively.
But I love that song, and I got to say, just kind of ironically, as a side note, I'm reading a very interesting book about Vietnam right now called Matterhorn by, I think his name is Carl Melantis. An incredibly gritty, the way it really was sort of story, and time again, I think about your song when I read that book. So it's really had an effect on me. So thank you for that. Tom, what's your background? How did you get your start?
I was I was raised. My daddy taught math at St. Paul's School in Concord, New Hampshire, and I grew up there as a faculty brat. I was shipped off to another prep school, went from there to Harvard, and it's kind of an unlikely thing to end up as a folk singer.
Didn't know they had a songwriting program there.
Well, they don't. They don't. You kind of had to make up your own. But the early 60s in Cambridge was really a hotbed of folk music, and I got dragged right into it, playing guitar, as Joe pointed out earlier in another discussion, mainly as a way to meet girls. And
yeah, that's what our background research shows.
Anybody that takes up the guitar and says otherwise is lying to you. That's the main motivation. It was a very exhilarating time, and I probably totally wasted a wonderful educational opportunity by focusing so much on the coffee houses and so little on the classrooms.
But you really have done a lot for other musicians as well. I know that James Taylor has quoted you as being a major influence, Garth Brooks as well. Even though you didn't write Circle Game, I have a sense that you had something to do with Joni Mitchell's career, and you
Well, I met her very early on when she was just starting to write, and ended up recording 3 of her songs on an album called The Circle Game, which kind of introduced her to the world, and she obviously went on to live up to all the promise that I thought she had,
and has really changed musically over the years. Country Joe, you come from the West Coast, kind of the West Coast music scene. Tom was out of Boston, Cambridge area. Where'd you get your start?
Well, I started playing music in the school orchestra, trombone, and listening to music on the radio. In Southern California, you could listen to, on the radio, traditional jazz, rock and roll, cool jazz, rhythm and blues, and I listened to all of it, and played the normal repertoire of a band, of the semi-classical and marching band, and eventually the rock and roll and the guitar took over. I had my first rock band when I was in high school, called the Nomads. But I didn't have the comfort of what Tom had in the area he was growing up, because Los Angeles County in California is very spread out, so there weren't a lot of coffee houses. There wasn't a scene. I stumbled into the scene up in the San Francisco Bay Area, but in Berkeley we only had a couple coffee houses. We didn't have a network of singers and songwriters and creative musicians. Very spread out. You know, people don't know San Diego is 600 miles from San Francisco, and LA, and there isn't too much in between. And country western music was big in Southern California too. I liked all kinds of music. I found great comfort in it, and never dreamed that I would make a living at it. It's been an incredible gift.
And I think it's reflected in your music that you're a stylist, in the sense that I think there's many different influences, many different styles of music that are reflected in your music. Tom, you recently have, I guess, what one would call a viral hit, a semi-contagious hit on YouTube. Is that the Remember song?
The musical equivalent of Ebola.
Yes, it is. Indeed, it's the Remember song. What's that song about? I can't remember.
I can't remember either. It's a funny thing. My web guy who runs TomRush.com was putting some stuff up on YouTube, and I said, well, let's put up that Remember song. You know, somebody might like it. You know, it doesn't cost anything. Why not? And it took off. And part of the curious thing is it's about this guy who can't, you know, find his car keys and his watch and his wallet, and can't remember his girlfriend's name by the end of the song. And it's a humorous take on age-related memory loss, but it went viral. There's 4 million. It's had 4 million views. It has been suggested that the 4 million views could
be
possibly
family
just
friends.
one guy who can't remember he's already seen it. But Joe says he doesn't remember doing that, and I trust him.
It's a hilarious song. It's called the Remember song. Just search for it on YouTube, and you're guaranteed to laugh. Actually, humor plays a big role in your music, I think.
I think, yeah. If I enjoy the silly stuff as well as the more intense, personal, introspective stuff.
Yeah, that's kind of silly too, though.
It's a good balance, I think.
Indeed.
Keep the audience off balance a little.
Country Joe, what's it like to have a file, an FBI file, and how enlightening was it to actually get a chance to read it after all those years?
Well, it's interesting. It's an education in getting FBI files. They've refused to give me any more than 2 pages for various reasons that you would imagine, ongoing cases and exposing. My parents had rather large FBI files, but they were also large pages redacted. There's been a big change. That was about 20 years ago that I did that, and my sister about 30 years ago got my parents' FBI files. But I recently resubmitted requests to the CIA, military intelligence, and the FBI for getting more information from those entities, and I think because of 9/11, it's extremely difficult to get information nowadays. There was a moment when that Freedom of Information Act happened, but built into the Freedom of Information Act also is the right of those entities to protect themselves. They're not obligated to incriminate themselves by giving you information that you request.
Yeah.
If you request information from them and they have on file information that would let you know that they broke laws watching you, they're not obligated to give you that information.
Well, they must have broken a lot of laws, because when I went online and saw yours that you posted on your website, unless you're a specialist on reading a big black square that's been marked up with a pen, there's nothing there.
Yeah, it's interesting too. The one bit of information there, it was during the time of the Chicago 7 trials, and which young people wouldn't know about, but people accused of starting the Chicago riots. But anyway, I was connected with that trial, and a phone call made from San Francisco to Chicago went via Washington, D.C., and you can see that little bit of information there, and you, of course, wonder why did a phone call? Was our phone tapped? I wonder. Is that normal routing for a phone call? But I didn't get much information from those two.
Yeah, well, I guess you get what you pay for. Tom, what's the Club 47 series?
Well, the Club 47 was, in my mind, the flagship of the coffee house fleet in Boston. There were a lot of coffee houses, but the Club 47 was special because they brought in the legends. They would go out and find some of these old singers who were sometimes retired and get them to dust off the guitar and come to Cambridge. It seated 80 people, but it was hugely influential because it was where you could go and hear these really seminal artists. And later on, I started putting together a series of concerts that featured established artists along with newcomers. Because I realized that if I just used established artists, it would then become a nostalgia show, and nostalgia just isn't what it used to be.
But really, you're helping introduce new artists in.
And it would keep us out of the nostalgia bin, and it would help introduce some up-and-comers. And I'd try to put together artists that were musically compatible, and then I would browbeat them into actually performing with one another.
And you still do that?
I haven't done any for quite a while. The browbeating part I've gotten good at, but I haven't done any shows for a while because nobody's asked me to.
Well, we need to do that.
And I haven't gone out looking for trouble because they're a lot of work.
Okay, well, don't get in too much trouble while you're here in Fort Wayne, or do and have fun, I don't know. But that's all the time that we have. Thank you both for coming on my show. It was a pleasure speaking with you both.
Thanks for having us.
We're going to go out tipping mastodons now.
Tipping man, good. For more information about Tom Rush, visit www.tomrush.com. And to follow Country Joe McDonald, you can visit his website at www.countryjoe.com. If you missed us on TV, you can find us on the internet. Arts Weekly can be seen on YouTube and Facebook, and you can follow us on Twitter. As always, Arts Weekly can be seen on Sundays on PBS and Tuesday through Thursday on College Access Television. I'm Chuck O'Connor. Thanks for tuning in to Arts Weekly. Join me next week with guest Will Dawson from the Wagon Wheel Theater and Jim Winger from the Northeast Indiana Bluegrass Association.
Hi, this is Tom, and your call means a lot to me. So leave a message at the tone. I'll do my best to try to remember to call you back when I get home. Beep. Tom, this is Millicent, and I'm trying not to cry. But I've been waiting here for over an hour. I thought you loved me. This is goodbye. Well, the voice sounds familiar, and the name, it rings a bell. Let's see now, where was I?